input. I can add input. So those are the structural parts of it. So I can add all those things. I need a heading, maybe from a main head using the H1. I can add those things. All right. Able to see them just arrange just in a way that is not even pleasant to watch or to show anyone. All right. So that, but the core foundation of that is what we are achieving, because without that, we can't do any other thing. So the HTML is for the structure. And then we discuss about the CSS, which I say for the styling. So for instance,
Yeah,
the
can you
HTML
hear me?
can,
Sorry for
Daniel,
yeah, sorry for cutting you short. I've started rolling.
okay, you
Okay.
started.
Yeah.
No problem.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, so I said the CSS, which is this cascading style sheet. For instance, the HTML can help us add the headings or a paragraph. Then let's assume in a place where I want to position that paragraph or the heading, maybe to be at the center or to be at the extreme, or to be at the middle or the center, just a position where I want to place it, the pleasant place to be, or I want to change the color, or I want to increase the size, or I want to add some beautiful effect on it, just to decorate it and make it very pleasant. Here comes the cascading style sheet, the CSS. So you can see the CSS as just beautifying whatever the structure has done, or whatever the HTML has done. So today we'll be taking the CSS fundamentals 1. All right.
I'll call this guy.
So please, Solomon, you can help me with the slides. All right. So thank you. The agenda for today, we'll first discuss the CSS fundamentals, the CSS syntax and selectors. Then how do we add CSS to HTML code or to HTML files? And then the question. So please move to the second page or the fourth page. All right, keep moving, sir. I think everyone knows me. I remain co-doctor. All right, thank you very much. So without wasting much time, first you ask yourself, what is CSS? I've made introduction about the CSS yesterday, and also I will also repeat that today. So first I said this CSS is a cascading style sheet. And you ask, what is it used for? Just like I've explained. So this styles the HTML elements, control layouts, change fonts and text appearance, add color, spacing, borders, and also makes your website responsive. So this is the same thing I've explained why I was running through what we did last previous workshop. All right. So I will focus on this website being responsive. Many people may be hearing the word being responsive. What does it mean to be responsive? For instance, you can develop a website, and it runs perfectly well, like so beautiful on your system. And maybe you use any means of hosting and you send it live and you send that thing to your friend and the person opens it on your phone and is asking you, my friend, what is this? I don't understand what you are doing. Everything looks so unorganized, right? So you ask, on my end, on my system is looking so good and it's okay. You can watch on it. You can see that only on your system or anybody using the last screen will see that is good. Any other person using different screen from yours, different screen size from yours, we see total mess. All right. So when a website is responsive, it makes on every screen size it fits very well, and that CSS will help you do that. CSS will help you do that. Next page, sir. Solomon waiting. Next page. Solomon, you still here? Confirm that you can still hear me, Solomon.
I'll try to get to him now. I'll try to get to him now.
Sorry, I'm having some issue with my laptop. That's why I'm not sharing from my end. So please bear with us just for this workshop. Why I still wait for Solomon to pick up? Maybe it's having a network issue or whatever. While we wait for him, I can still speak more on some points, like number 2 there. And if you look this, please, I will ask a question before I proceed. What type of list? Because I'm listing what CSS is used for. What kind of list is this? Is it an ordered list or unordered list? Can somebody answer that for me? Rahim.
Unordered list.
Okay, unordered list. And why is it unordered list?
Because unordered lists are arranged using maybe bullets, dicks. But other lists are always in numbers like alphabet, numerals, 1, 2, 3, and all that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So the order does not matter, right? We don't. I didn't care about the order, so I can pick from the ground and start. It doesn't matter because they are not arranged through. All right. So I say first one, styled element, HTML elements have said that, beautifying it, changing the position, then control layout. All right. So the layout, as we proceed on this fundamental course, we discuss more about the layout, the control layout. So this is generally how we display whatever element. For instance, I can have a double cards. I can have 3 cards. What I mean by cards, maybe it's like kind of a boss. Let me use that to explain this. I can have kind of a boss, and I can have that 3 boss arranged um, vertically, meaning on a straight line. But what I want is to make them maybe 2 on this column, another 2 on this column. I'm making another row, right? Then another 2 on this column. That means I'm having 3 columns and 2 rows. All right. You can see that I am now talking about positioning. So this CSS will help us achieve that. The CSS will help us achieve that. All right. So everything about layout, how your page should appear, the CSS is very, very good and can help us achieve that. So you can also change fonts. So I think our common fonts, we can see, we get this area, time numeral, right? So kind of
Alpha.
fonts, depending on what you are trying to achieve, depending on what you are trying to display. So there are different fonts that specify different reasons. Like you want to make a heading, you can't use like this single serif. You can't use it, right? Because those are very, very tiny. They are tiny fonts. So depending on what you want to achieve, the fonts, you can choose different fonts. And text appearance, how does it appear? Should it appear bold, italic, right? Can it appear? Though we have some elements, HTML element that is doing this, like we discussed about text formatting. CSS also do that. So we can also use CSS to change how our text appear, maybe being it bold, being it italic, being it underlined, making it subbed, right? And so on and so forth. Also, colors. We can add colors, spacing, right? Giving a space. So most times you open your website, you will see that the beginning of those things are not slapping to the edge of your screen. So there's kind of space. Even on this call, if you check, you see that there's kind of space away from your screen, round about it. Even between those people on this meet, you see there are spaces. So these spaces are added using CSS spacing, and also borders. So borders is simply something rounding whatever box or object. Just like as I'm speaking, there's a border green surrounding my own profile. All right. So that is border. And we've spoken about being a site being responsive. I don't know. Solomon, please, are you confirm you are still here? I'm waiting for you.
What are you seeing on your screen? Because I'm sharing exactly what is on the slide. CSS syntax is what I'm sharing at the moment. So I don't know if
We
you are
can't see
seeing
it.
it.
I can't see it.
I can't see it.
All we've seen is what is CSS.
What is CSS?
Imagine. I've been sliding and sliding since. Let me change it again. I've reshared again.
Okay. Yes, I can see
Yes,
that
I
now.
can
Thank
see
you
that.
very much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
All right.
So now we'll talk
So
about
now we'll talk about
CSS
CSS
syntax.
thing.
Just like, excuse me, let me leave this
Excuse
call
me,
and
let me leave this call and
all right, so we'll talk about CSS syntax. So many people they are not used to this word
talk about
syntax.
CSS syntax.
It's very
So many
strange.
people they are
You
not used to
question
this word syntax.
what is
Very
syntax?
strange. What is syntax?
So syntax
So
generally means
syntax
a
generally means a
particular program.
particular
Like
program.
for instance, when we are
Like
doing
for instance,
HTML, when we are doing HTML, I gave you the structure how to follow. First, it must have its version, then have it enclosed within the HTML and the HTML opening tag and the closing tag. Then has a head section and a body section. This is its own syntax, how you must write HTML. All right. In CSS, we also have its own syntax, a pattern or a rule you must follow. Right. So first, you must have a selector. What are selectors? So selectors are like targeting each element. What element do I want to target? There is the work of the selector. So you are targeting elements. So it can be by its element name, it can be by its ID, it can be by a class, it can be by its attributes, depending on what you want to select it with. All right. Then first thing you must select, you must put a selector, meaning the elements. That's what we are referencing. You are styling HTML elements. So whatever you are styling, you must be calling an HTML element. For example, here we have H1, right? If I want to style H1, heading 1, I must call it heading 1 if that is what I want to call by its tag name or by its element name, H1, which means heading 1. Then followed by its property, right? A property is just like, for instance, I have in a human, you ask property age, my age. That means I'm expected to give a value, the actual age. You can ask me property height. I'm expected to give you my height. You can ask me property complexion. I'm meant to give you. All right. So those is more or less saying that property actually requires a value. For instance, I say a color. So there can be so many values for color, can be black, it can be white, it can be green, whatever. So there must be a property. So first is the selector, next is property, then value, right? Then this curly brace you see here, this is where we add the declaration block, right? So everything I have, so the property and the value makes up a declaration, right? So a property and a value, for instance, I say under H1, I want to make a declaration of color, all right? I say property of color, red. I have made a declaration. I can still proceed to add another declaration. Maybe I can add font size, and I say 5 pixels. I can say 2 rem, whatever size I want to choose, right? So that is another declaration. Then you can see another thing I have there, the semicolon. So this semicolon differentiates between a property and a value. So whenever you have a property, for it to have its value, it must be separated with a column. Then end each declaration with semicolon. What do I mean? If I have my first, let's say for instance, this H1 is a property. H1 is a selector targeting the element heading 1, or I select paragraph P, for instance, targeting the paragraph P, and I want to make the color to be green. Same paragraph, I want to make the font to increase maybe by 30 pixels, right? Same paragraph, I want to change the text format to bold. So you can see I have said 3 things. So I have said 3 declarations. So each declaration I'm doing, I must end it with a semicolon to indicate that this is where it ends, the end of this declaration. Then you cannot have another declaration. Then all these declarations must be enclosed in between these curly braces, curly brackets. So you can see this snippet I added. For instance, open this and I have color blue, ending with a semicolon. I have a font size, the same column to indicate this is a property. The column says after the column, you are expected to give me the value of whatever property you specified. Then I add 12 pixels. Just imagine if I want to add another declaration, I will end this 12 pixel with a semicolon before adding. Hence, I will have an error. I believe that is clear. Please proceed to the next slide, sir. Thank you. So this is a perfect example. So don't be confused whether it's being on a straight line, whether it being break on different blocks. So this is just a perfect way just to format our code and make it readable, right? The previous slide, you can see that I made them on a straight line. But what matters is checking where each declaration ends with a semicolon. So you can arrange them line by line for a particular declaration, be on this line. When you are done with that, break to the next line, add the next declaration, break, add the next declaration as much as possible. You are not limited. You can add as many declarations as you want, depending on what you want to achieve for that element or you want to achieve on that session. Please go on. So parts of CSS syntax. So the same thing we have been saying, I have discussed about the selectors, I have discussed about the property and the value. So just do a recap. So it said this selector targets the HTML element. Example, the P, H1, A, which is the anchor tag, input, dot class, meaning a class name, hash ID, the ID, which is unique. Then asterisk. Asterisk means universal selector. So if I want to select everything on my web page, then I can have, for instance, I can have the head, I can have the text, I can have my table, I can have so many elements. Once I use this asterisk, which is the star, and I open my declaration block, and for instance, if I do that, I say font size 30. What happens that all text on that page will adapt because this is a universal selector targeting all elements on that page. Then the property, what you want to change, right? Like I explained, what property? Like we have a color, font size, background margin, etc. Then value, you must set a value whenever a property is given. Like I gave instance, so I'm starting. If you give me, say, height, which is a property, I'm expected to give you my height, which is the value. You say my school, I'm expected to give you the name of my school, right? So property is kind of a question and answer, if I can place it that way. So whenever I have a property, you are expected to give a value, all right? So just think of it. If I can't have an answer to this, that means it doesn't serve as a property. For instance, I can't say red. Red is not a property because if I say red, that is the final bus stop. I have actually said the value. If you say red, there's nothing else to say. But if I say color, you are expecting, what color? Right? It's just like an equation. I say font size, you say what size? Right? I say margin, you say what margin? Just like that. So you can see that this thing looks like a question and answer. So you first of all ask yourself, this thing I'm writing as a property, am I expected to give a value? Does it look like there should be a value? So that gives you an idea to know what you are doing. That gives you an idea to follow up. So please scroll, sir. Thank you. So this same thing I've said. So multiple declarations, the same thing I just explained. So multiple declarations means multiple properties, and each ends with semicolon, which I've also explained, or inside the curly brace. I have explained all this. So each of these lines means a declaration. So how do we add CSS to HTML? So there are three ways you can add the CSS to HTML. First is the inline CSS. Second, the internal CSS. And thirdly, external CSS. Before I proceed, please, these three are very good, but the recommended one is external. We'll discuss how each of them works, and as we proceed, we dwell on the external. Why do we choose external to be recommended? You can leave it that way, sir. Thank you very much. Why do we choose external to be recommended? The external is just creating external file, just not to make our work bulky. Because when we have, imagine you have 10,000 lines of whatever you are doing, it looks so messy to read. But imagine I break down that 10,000, maybe 5 sections, chapter 1, chapter 2. You can easily flow and understand it. That's why we always choose external, so that you can just separate each of these things to be on their own and easy to read and easy to understand. So first is the inline CSS. So what is inline CSS? Inline CSS, please scroll to the next. I think I made a mistake from this. All right. So sorry, I interswitched this. This is meant to be the inline CSS. All right, so let me use this to explain. This is meant to be the inline CSS. So the inline CSS actually means the CSS written in between the properties of those HTML elements. The property written in between the HTML element. For instance, you are seeing the H1, which is the heading one, and I am adding a property called style. And this style is a property. What is property? A property is adding additional information to the element. So I can say style, which is a property, and I give whatever style I want to add for it. Same thing happens. Okay, before I proceed, can somebody unmute and tell me which other element here that has another inline styling, and what style does it have? I mentioned about the H1 having the style color yellow. Please someone unmute and tell me which element has another attribute of inline CSS, and what are you seeing?
Raising his testosterone and increasing his serotonin before the poker game. This is why I'm the best at everything, because there's layers. Nerds, you know that.
Do we still have people here?
Studying the poker
We
cards.
have
Right here. Okay.
the paragraph.
She's
The
okay.
paragraph, it has inline styling of color.
The headline player tonight.
Color.
Which is
Aquin.
aqua.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much. That is correct. So, and we still have two elements, H2, another paragraph that doesn't have this inline styling. Please go back to the previous slide, sir. So the next is the internal CSS. So what is internal CSS? This internal CSS is placed using HTML elements and is placed on the head section. And we said this head section, what do we add on the head section? That's the first thing you ask yourself. Whatever we add on the head section, our information, our page information, not the actual content, right? So this is the information saying, I want this particular thing to appear this way. It's an information, all right? So those things you are adding, you add it on the hex section, the internal using the style element. So what do you do? The style element is a pale element, meaning it has its own opening and a closing tag, just like every other element, like the paragraph, the heading one, the table, the input, and so on and so forth. So the style also is its own element. So you have the opening of style and the closing of style, which uses the fragments, the less than, forward slash, and you close it with this element name and greater than, right? The in between those tags is now where you have your content. So that's why you see that I'm breaking the style. If you look the indexing, you see that down, it has its own closing. Then in between it, then I'm writing exactly the syntax just I've explained. First, I call the selector, right? The selector in between, I can call the selector being P. Then using the declaration block, the curly brace. Then in between those curly brace, make sure that whenever you open your curly brace, it must be closed. Don't open it and leave it, right? Whenever you open, it must be closed. So for better practice, whenever you open, make sure the close is present before writing. Then in between, just like when you open your elements, don't open any elements without closing it. Or else that element is a self-closing element, right? But the same thing happens to this
Good morning.
CSS. Don't open your declaration block
Have you seen the
without
money?
closing it. Maybe you say later I'll do it. You might forget and it's already an error, right? So that is the best practice. Whenever you open the curly brace, make sure the closing is the same. Then you can break it down. In between that curly brace is now where we start adding your declaration. This is for internal CSS. This is for internal CSS. So you can have the color, which is the property, a semicolon, a column rather, a column differentiating the property to expect the value. All right, you add the value, and if you want a multiple declarations, then you cannot close with a semicolon. Then you can add the next one below, just like you can see here. The P having the color and the font size. After I'm done with the P, I want to style the next element. I will leave everything about that P totally, meaning leaving the last curly brace, the closing curly brace, right? I will leave it and go make and give a space below and then repeat the same thing. The selector, another selector, then the declaration block. I hope that is clear. This is for internal. All right, that means this can be placed at the hex session and you reference your elements. The next page, sir, for the external. So the external, like I said, is actually creating a file.
That's Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is an allegory
next page, sir.
Farm that has a bunch of pigs that are mistreated by human farmers. So they try to
The next,
and create their own society.
I'm still seeing inline.
Only to then realize that they become.
All right, so I can't see the next page. Okay, thank you. So the external CSS is actually creating a separate file, right? So the file extension for CSS is .css. I believe when I was discussing HTML, I spoke about extension, file extension. So when you see image JPG, you know it's an image MP4, same things in this same file. So whenever you see a file ending with .css, is the CSS file, right? That is the extension. Same thing for HTML. When you see .html, that is the HTML file. Same thing for JavaScript. When you see .js, that is the JS file. And every other file you want to open, it has its own extension. All right. So for this, let's assume we have created a file called style.css somewhere else, right? Maybe it can be on this root directory or a external place. It can be somewhere outside our directory. But let's assume we are on the same folder. That's what I mean by directory. We are on the same folder, the same place. Where I have my HTML is where I have my style.css. Let's assume. All right. So after creating two different files, you first have my HTML file, maybe intro.html, and I have below style.css. Two files inside. Then I have to link the CSS to my HTML. Whatever I'm doing must be linked. CSS must be added to your HTML file. If not, no effects. No matter what you are doing, be it inline, be it internal, be it external, you must add it to that HTML file you want to make it to take up the operation because you are targeting HTML elements. So how do I add? Then I will use, after creating it, I will use another element called link. All right. So you can see that link. Please, someone ask look at this link. Is this a Perl element or a self-closing element? Chisum, Rahim, please
Yes,
answer that very quick.
I think it's a self-closing element, sir.
Why is it a self-closing element?
Yeah, I don't know.
Huh? We can't hear you. All right, so it's a self-closing element because you can see that there is no actual content we are adding and it closes using the last fragment, the greater than sign, right? So you can see that this is a self-closing element. All we just need is the attributes. That's all we are adding to this element. So this is another example of self-closing elements. So as we proceed, you see that we can discover so many things, more elements that you see day by day. We have introduced you to another element called style, used for the internal, right? Introducing that another element called link, mostly used for style sheets, right? Mostly you can use it for many linkings, but majorly we use it for style sheet. So what are style sheets? Just your CSS files, right? That you have styled, right? So this relationship is the style sheet and an attribute. Now what this reference, this href, what are you referencing? You are referencing the actual file, that you want to link to this HTML that is responsible for these designs, right? So assume that let's use a practical example here. I am taking this course, right? And Daniel is meant to record this meeting, right? For him to record this meeting, he has to be present in this meeting. That is what is happening. If he's outside, he can't, no effect. That's why we have to wait. We waited for him to join. Same thing happens here. So if you have a standard CSS, that HTML is waiting for you to add him here. Add that HTML is waiting for you to add that CSS you have done so I can take effect. So make sure whenever you have a standard CSS, you must add it to your HTML to take effect. All right, so that is for the external. Next is the basic selectors. So I will just run through this. So what are the basic selectors? First, we have the element selector, which I have done in introduction. What are element selectors? Just the elements you give me like 3 other elements that you know. 3, aside from what you are seeing on the screen. Give some 3, rate him 3, and we proceed.
The paragraph element.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
The paragraph element.
The bot?
Paragraph. P.
Okay, paragraph. The P element. I think it's on the screen. Aside what you are seeing on the screen, give me another one.
Okay, I think we have the IMG.
Okay, for image. Okay.
Yes, we have IMG. We have A href,
Link. Okay.
which
That
is
is
for the
anchor tag for link.
anchor tag,
Okay.
and
Just
then
give me one more. Let's proceed.
I think we have BR, which is the break. BR, yeah.
The break. BR
Yeah.
serves a single purpose, right? So you might not
Yeah.
style it. What is the BR doing? Just to break to the next line, right? So it
Yes,
doesn't it
break
doesn't
the
require
next.
any style. Yes, you just go to the next style. So basically it requires no style. What are you styling for breaking a line? There's not actually a purpose. Let's maybe you
Okay,
can
and
add a
then
height.
we have the table
All right.
element, right?
All right. We have the table tag. Okay, that's for the elements. I believe we all. So these element selector, just call them by the element name without the fragments, meaning without those tags, without the opening and the closing tag, without the less than and the greater than. You don't need it. Just call the actual element. If it's IMG, you just call IMG, nothing attached to it. Then do the declaration. Next is the class selector. So a class is an attribute in HTML, right? So what is this class doing? It's just like naming elements. I don't want to call, let's assume I have 10 paragraphs on my page. How do I differentiate each of those paragraphs? Is a question. Because if I call by element name, I call paragraph P, and I say color green, it will affect all the paragraph on my page. If I have 100 paragraphs, all paragraphs become green. So question becomes, oh, if I want to style just a particular paragraph that has introduction about me, How do I do that? Here comes your naming. So you can use the class. The class can say, oh, the class attribute say you can give any name on that and call it by that name. So a paragraph, for instance, I cannot rename it. Maybe I give it a name and I call it a class and I call it co-doctor. All right, I can give it any name, but most time we advise you should give it a name according to what you are doing, so that anybody in your code can read it and understand what you are doing. All right, so I can give it any name. Let's just play along and maybe I give it a class. I call a class and give it an attribute, and I give it Chisum for that paragraph. If I want to style it, I will start with a dot first. If I start with a dot, then I cannot add the name of that element I have given. That's the class name. So Chisum, then I now have my curly brace. It will style only basically any element that has the class name of Chisum. Next is the ID. Please move to the next slide, sir. You can move to the next time. Okay, thank you. Next is ID selector. So the same thing, the work of the class, like for example, we saw they're using highlight, giving the class highlight, and when you are styling, you call it by dot highlight. Same thing, what the class is doing is what the ID is doing. But the difference is for ID, just like ID, unique. You can hear ID. The word ID means unique. Like your ID number, nobody else is permitted to have the same ID with you. All right. So the word ID, so some elements where you want them to be unique, you don't want them to be repetitive, just one, just nobody else, no other element should bear it. You use the ID elements. All right. So ID elements are always unique. So when you use the ID instead of class, you say ID Chisum. When styling it in your SSS, in CSS, you use hash. For the class, you use dots. For the element, remember, for the element selector, you just call the element name, img p h1. For class selector, you call first dot. That was indicate that this is a class name, dot before the name of the class. Then when it's an ID, you call hash before the ID name. Then every other declaration block and declaration follows. The next one is the universal selector. So like I said in the beginning, the selector, what does the selector do? It selects every element or everything on my web page. Like you see here, asterisk, and I say margin and padding 0. Automatically, all the page, it becomes 0. The margin and the padding becomes 0 automatically because I've selected everything. Please move to the next slide. Thank you.
If you come close, something must happen to him or her. This is powerful. Don't even joke with it.
Solomon?
Anything that involves egg and alligator pepper. Now banga. See how to do this.
Solomon?
Get an egg.
Move to the next slide.
Alligator pepper.
Okay. While I'm with you,
Normal transparent nylon.
I'm still seeing the ID selector. I think the network is broken.
Use it to open small here. Open this
Yes,
alligator
I'm not
pepper
seeing it. I'm
from
still
your
seeing the
bag.
ID.
Then bring out all the seed.
I
Get a plate. Make sure one seed
want
does
to
not
fix this
escape.
slide. I'll ask a question. Let's assume I have an image element. I have an image element, and I gave it an ID of Nigeria flag. I gave it an ID of Nigeria flag. Then I want to add a color, a property color and a value green to it. How do I call it on my HTML, on my CSS rather? How do I call it? An ID Nigeria flag. I want to call that element with that ID name on my CSS file. How do I call it? Chisum, any idea? Chisum, Rahim, please unmute your mic and answer. Yes, you can speak, Rahim.
So I think you will call it using the hash. Hash. Then it will be hash Nigeria flag.
Okay.
Then we have
After the
the
Nigeria flag, what follows?
sir.
After the Nigeria flag, what follows?
Then we have the curly bracket. So it will now be color.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Semicolon green.
Okay. Green. Perfect. Perfect answer. I'll give you enough plus. That is nice. So next is the grouping and combining selectors. In a short form, group, meaning multiple. So let's assume I want class of Chisholm, class of Daniel, class of Rahim, class of Solomon to have the same color. Right? So let's say there is an element that has a class Chisholm and these names I mentioned, and I want all of them to have the same color. I shouldn't repeat myself because there's something we do on programming, dry, don't repeat yourself. It's forbidden. Any programmer seeing you repeating yourself, it looks like you are playing. Why doing that? Which you can use a way to do it. So when you have a code that you know that these things should work the same, don't repeat yourself. There are always a way to do that without repeating yourself. Right? So if I want to style Chisholm, Daniel, Rahim, and Tantam is just joining us, right? I want to style them property value red. I leave the curly brace or the declaration block, and I'll come again, say dot Daniel, another color red. I'm repeating myself, right? That is where we have the grouping and the combining selectors. So how do we do that? Instead of repeating, I can call dot Chisholm, I give comma to say there are more things I want to add. I will say dot Daniel, I give comma. I will say dot Rahim, I give a comma. Right? So after I'm done with the number of elements I want to call, so you can call whether be it by selector, by class, by ID, right? I can open the declaration block and say color. So once that applies, all these elements I've called will automatically takes up that declaration. That is for grouping. This is the descendant selector. So this is actually how to break it down. Let's say we have, I think when I was teaching HTML, I spoke about nested elements. So nested element meaning you are under this person, like a tree. I have, for instance, I have a hedge one, in between that hedge one. Okay, perfect example is the table. When we're discussing the table, under the table, we broke it down to have first the T hedge, which is the T head, which is table head, right? Then we move down to the another inside that table head, we created a row, TR, right? After that TR, we now start adding TH, the table head, right? The hairs and every other thing we want to add for that. So these are examples of nested elements. So this is the same thing we were explaining for this descendant selector. So let's assume, for instance, that table that has table row TR, right? I want to style that table head under table, right? So I can't easily call table the TH directly because it has a parent element. So that is where, for me to access that TH, I'll first of all call the TD to reference that this is actual one I'm calling. I'm calling the T head under the table, right? I call the table, then I give a space. Whenever you give a space, you are telling him access whatever this one, which is under the next one. So if I call T table, I give a space, I say T head, meaning I'm saying access T head under table. So this is descendants, right? I'm looking for the child of the table. I hope that is clear, right? So the difference between this grouping, for the grouping, there is comma. So whenever you use comma, it means you are grouping, you are adding so much. But when there is a space, it means you are descending, right? You are looking for the child under this particular element. That is the difference between these two. And the same process, you open your curly brace, your syntax, and the property and the value. Next slide, sir. Solomon. All right. right, thank you very much. So next one is called pseudo
Have all these people that
classes.
I hate.
So this might be a bit strange. Pseudo selector, pseudo classes, right? So if you are hearing for the first time, just keep saying it, pseudo, right? So what is pseudo classes? All right. So this ties elements in a spatial state. So you might have seen a website, maybe open it on your laptop, and you over your mouse. Immediately you over your mouse, something happens, right? Maybe as you over, color might change. As you over, just what I mean by over, meaning rubbing your mouse. You didn't click, you just take your mouse around that environment where that thing is, and something happens. All right. So these are spatial states or spatial
Make sure all of
designs. And we can use the pseudo classes or pseudo selectors to achieve that. Like I said, first thing is the hover. Hover means you are running. So you have seen this very common when you say take your mouse or just over your mouse, and maybe when you over, something happens. Maybe you can over and they add a border, right? So that is a special design or special state, all right, special style. So how do I achieve that? I use the pseudo classes. So some common pseudo classes are this: column hover, column focus. What do you mean by focus? It run first. Immediately the site runs, immediately it focus on it. All right. So that is what it means. Then active, when it's focused, when it's active on it, when it's active. For instance, input. When I click on my input, I have focused on it. It start blinking for it, that test cursor showing that I can type on this. I have focused on it. Then active, then the first child and the last child. So this first child, like I said, like for the nested element, the first child means the first nested element under him. The last child means the last child on that same nested element. All right, just beginning the first and the last. So how do I add that to my CSS? Just call whatever element you want to add this special effect on. Let's say, for instance, I have a paragraph, right? A P paragraph. I want to, whenever I over on it, I want the text to increase. Or whenever I over on it, I want the color to change. First of all, I will call the P. Then after P, I will have my column. Don't give a space. All right. After the P, you add your column. Join together. Don't give a space. You add the column, then you write this over. All right. After the over, then you can open your declaration block and do whatever. So whatever you are written under that declaration block, we only take effect when you over, because you're adding the over classes. Same thing for the focus and active, the first child and the last child. So these are special or pseudo classes. Please, next slide, sir. So this is a typical example of what I said. So you can see for the anchor tag, I have my A, right? Immediately after it, I'm adding my colon and hover. So any effect I have, so this color red will only take effect when you over on that anchor tag, on that link, right? So most times you have seen that if you over on something, on a particular link, something might happen. Maybe it will underline or it will change color, right? These are over effects. Same thing for the LI, which is for the list. The first child of that list, LI, maybe you have 10 lists, and I say LI first child, meaning the first list of that will be styled. So only the first LI will be changed color property to blue. And that is how we achieve those pseudo classes. So this column, whatever you are seeing,
Hello? Daddy, what's up now?
next slide.
I'm in Moya.
Oh,
Okay.
I saw the screen now. So CSS is, waiting for him to open up.
Okay, Kiji making it.
So my counsel, okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, next one is CSS specificity. All right, that is the next. So you
Call the
ask
number,
yourself,
let me do
what
it for you
is
now.
specificity? So this determines which CSS rules applies, just like an
No,
hierarchy, which comes first. That's what we actually, this grammar we're not
You
speaking,
see
we are
that?
counting which comes first in hierarchy. If I have this and I have this, which will take over. All right. So first, the hierarchy we have mentioned. So the inline styles is the number one. All right. So let me explain this before I release them out. So let me assume I have an external file. I have my CSS of paragraph that has a class, let's say Chisom. I don't know why I'm liking to use Chisom first name. Maybe my daughter will be Chisom. Don't mind me. All right, so I use Chisom as a class. All right, Chisom as a class on my external, and I give it a color, purple. Right, external. Then the same element that has Chisom class, I open my HTML file and I add on my head, which is internal, the style element, and I say color green, the same class. On the inline, which is between those elements, between the elements paragraph, I also write attribute style and say color blue. So now you see that I have the same thing that have different color. The question will now be which one will display? Because first on the external we have purple, on the internal we have green, on the inline we have blue. There are the three colors on the same element. That's where this hierarchy or specificity comes in, which will happen. That is the hierarchy. So whenever you have inline style, that inline will take over to take first. So immediately I have that inline blue will display, ignoring the external and the internal. So whenever the next one is the ID selector. So if, for instance, on my external, I am using ID, hash ID. I'm using hash ID. And I have internal, which is the style element. The ID will override the internal, right? Because on hierarchy, ID comes first, second. Inline comes first, ID comes second. But if I have ID and I have inline, always that inline will take over, will be the first. But when I don't have inline and there is ID, ID will be the first. All right. Then follows by the class selector before the elements. All right. So after this element, then if we proceed, we cannot have by nature. Okay, let me take nature by the three ways of adding the internal, the inline, and the external. Inline comes first, then internal second, and external. I'm dividing them by the three ways we're adding. So whenever you have inline, it will override. If you have internal and you have external, whatever on the internal will override the external. The external is the list. All right. Then follows by all these we have the ID, the class, and the element. I hope that is clear. So next slide, sir. That is the hierarchy. Solomon. Just look at this. So we have a paragraph that has color blue. That same paragraph has a class of class text, and I gave it color red, and I also gave it another ID name. That same paragraph text, and I gave it a color red. Okay, I think I'm using same. Let's assume the hash, I gave it a color green. All right, let's change the color from the class red. So on the hash, we change the color to green. Now a question is which selector will win and why? Can somebody unmute and answer?
Okay, I think the paragraph with the color is going to win because what they did there is
What is
inline
the color?
styling.
Let's be sure what you are choosing.
With
The paragraph
the color blue,
blue will win. Okay, why will it
yes,
win?
because it's an inline styling.
Look where. What is inline styling?
The styling was done inside of the paragraph.
No. Look very well. Is there a syntax? There is. Please, Solomon, move to the previous slide.
Okay.
Previous slide. Let us see something. All right. So you can see that we have inline and we also have elements. What is element selector? When you select a particular element and open the declaration block. So the first number one, please go back to the next slide. The first one is a element selector. The first one is element selector. The second one is class selector, and the last one is ID selector. So give me another answer. Now I'll break it down. So which will win? Kisom?
Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm just saying it now. Okay, so I think the ID selector is going to win. The red. Is that
Why will the ID selector win?
because according to the order you gave,
Okay.
yes.
All right. That is correct. According to the order, the hash, which is the ID, comes first, even though it's at the third, right? You know that programs runs line by line. So by default, the P will run first, third, second, before the hash, right? So by default, it runs line by line. But because of the hierarchy, it will ignore the rest and choose the ID because is top on the hierarchy among this list. So after this hash, before the class and even the element. That is correct. Move to the next slide. I think that is where we are. Do we still have more on our
They are
slide?
applying for what? I was saying
All right.
this. Sure, I was telling you that.
So we have completed the fundamentals of CSS, the basic things you need to know, the selectors, the syntax, and how it works, and the specificity of all those orders. So now it's time for questions and discussion. Though I've been adding questions during my classes, but now it's time for question and discussion. So if you have any question regarding what we have discussed on the CSS fundamentals, unmute your mic and ask your question.
So can you give us an example of inline styles?
Inline styles is in between, let's say, open my body section under my HTML file, right? Under my HTML section where I have my heading and the body, and I have, let me use a different element. I have an anchor tag, a tag, right? Inside that a tag where I have my href. After that href, I can give a space and add another attribute, style, inside same in between that, just an attribute. The difference is that those styles are added on the attributes, which is the opening tag of it, right? I add the whatever style attribute. The attributes are written by the attribute name, assignment, and a string and a double quotes, right, to add the value. The inside that quote, I can add color, I can add font size. So it doesn't follow the syntax, the proper syntax rule, like when we have a declaration block and maybe just it doesn't follow that declaration block syntax, right? So it's just written as an attribute in between the elements. So if you have a paragraph P and you say, I am coming, you don't need to go to the head section, just go to the opening tag of that P and say style and add a color. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Any other question?
So which type of CSS is best to use
External.
when you are
External.
external? Okay.
External. The reason why external is best is just not to make your work bunky, meaning not too much. Imagine I have, let's assume I have 100 lines of HTML elements, right? That is already a lot for normal beginner, right? Or let's say we have 1,000 line of HTML, just HTML element, 1,000. And on my heading, I'm adding another maybe 3,000 lines of style. You can see that total line of that code becomes like 5,000 or 4,000, which is already so long. So why we choose external CSS is for it to be on a separate file to make your code readable. All right. And another advantage why your code should be on a external file, you can also add that CSS to other HTML files. Right? I can just send that link to the person, and the person can another person can add it to his own file because it's on a separate file. So I can have a general default code that can work for anybody, just like some CSS frameworks we have. They can have CSS frameworks, can have inline, and cannot have internal because other people can use them on their file. So that's why it's external, so that other people can use it. So it's reusable. You can use it and use it again. Does that make sense?
He's a businessman now.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other question? Is so many question?
No, sir. No, sir. I don't have any questions, sir.
So that means if I ask you, you can answer me perfectly well.
Yay. I can try, sir.
Why the A? Okay. Yes, I have questions. I have a lot of questions. So my question, what is different between a class and ID? Chisholm? Chisholm, what is different between a class and ID? Maybe you can unmute and shout your A again. Chisholm, we are waiting for you. Rahim, you can help her out. What is the difference between a class and ID? That's question one. Question two, how do we use the class on our CSS and how do we use the ID on our CSS? So 2 questions in one. What's the difference between CSS and CSS? What's the difference between the class and the ID? And how do we use the CSS class? How do we use the class and the ID on our CSS file?
So the class selector, it starts with a dot, and
Okay.
it's mostly used for, like, maybe you want to style a particular header or a particular paragraph, because you might have so many headers, so many paragraphs in your HTML. So you make use of the class selector. The ID starts with hash, and it starts with hash. I think it's used for styling.
I will give you half clap. I wish they have half clap here without giving you half clap. All right, so the ID is unique, right? Meaning it's expected to be just one. All right, one. So the class, let's assume I have a class Chisholm, right? Many elements can take up that class name Chisholm. So let's say, for instance, I have a dot class color green, right? So whenever I need a color of green, I can just add the class Chisholm, and that's whatever element will take up that. So you can see that multiple elements can have the same class name. Your paragraph, your H1, your div, your input can have the same class name. Maybe what that class is doing is just to give a color green, or just to give a padding or a margin, a space, right? But for ID, once an element is used an ID, no other element is permitted to use it. It's unique. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's move on.
Okay, sir. Sorry, sir.
Okay.
I was doing something, so sorry I couldn't answer. So I want to ask, like, since ID is a unique identity you give to a particular element, so does it mean that for class now, class can share that same property? For instance, H1, H2, H3 can share the same attributes you give to them while you're styling it, unlike the ID.
Yes, partially, yes. Why I say partially, the way you placed it. So what the class is doing, that multiple elements can have the same class name and share the properties. All right. So I can have my H1, all right, H1 element, and I say the color of this H1 should be green. Right? So this H1, and maybe I gave it a class of your name, Chisom, and I use my CSS, I say dot Chisom, color green. Then within my HTML file or HTML code, I can have maybe a paragraph, another paragraph. I can add the same class Chisom, which I have added on the H1, that has a property of color and a value of green. Automatically, that paragraph will take up that declaration, the property and the value. But for ID, if I have H1 dash ID Chisom, I am not expected to come back and say P ID Chisom. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Any more question before we proceed and round up for the day? The absence of question, let's see some key takeaway from what we have done. So please, Solomon, you can move to the next slide. Solomon, please, can you hear me? Please move to the next class while we round up. All right, thank you. So these are some few takeaway. Why? So, and they're very, very important. One, these are on other list. First, use external CSS, and I've recommended why, and I'll explain why you should use it. So it's recommended to use external CSS. Avoid too many IDs, right? So don't use too many IDs on your code. This is unique, so you don't conflict yourself of repeating IDs, right? Minimize the use of ID, or less when it's necessary, right? Keep selectors simple, right? Keep the selectors simple as possible. Then use meaningful class names. I said that in the beginning, like I was using Chisom. Why we use meaningful class name? Referencing, let's say for instance, like I said, I am working on a paragraph that is saying Nigeria color, right? I can write on Nigeria flag, or maybe a story about Nigeria flag. On my class, I can say Nigeria flag, right? So it's relating to what I'm doing. So use meaningful class name so that anybody reading your code can understand what you are doing so easily. So don't go and use something abstract from what you are doing. So naming convention is very, very important. Then avoid over nesting. All right, avoid over nesting, right? Adding so many nesting, maybe in one element you have 10,000 of or 100 elements under it. All right, unless you are using a semantic element, maybe for grouping, maybe for a particular section, then all the section can be under that. Aside from that, avoid using over nesting. All right, next page, sir. So summary of what we have done today. Solomon, you can. All right. So the summary of what we have done: CSS uses selector, property, and value. Just know that when you talk about CSS, just know that there are three things involved: selector, there must be a selector, there must be a property, and there must be a value. These three things, all these three things are missing. You have not written anything on CSS. All right. So say the selectors target elements, which we said I can have the element be by element name, class name, um, class name, ID, pseudo classes, and the rest, right? Then classes are reusable. That's what I just explained. When you use classes, you can repeat it. You can use classes over and over again within your code. All right. IDs are unique. IDs can be repeated. All right. So specificity determines priority. So while we have extended the hierarchy, right? So by those priorities means which one comes first. So you know how you organize your code. So I shouldn't write a code on your external and you'll come and repeat the same thing on your internal, right? It will override it. So that is what we have done today. And I believe is well understood and utilized and well digested.
Eh?
So as we conclude,
Okay.
move to the next slide, sir.
Bye.
So, all right, and this is the final place. Next, thank you. So we are done for today. The next, sir. The next slide. Solomon. Yes. So further learning materials, which I always recommend for beginners HTML and CSS is W3 schools, right? You can is well broken down with practicals. So you can just open their documentation, go through the CSS, and each one you have any issue on, you can come to the use documentation like MDN, right? You can use the come to community forum like we already have a forum, our desktop. Come there, ask your question. You can also go and watch tutorials for those that love videos. Instead of watching Jackie Chan and watching Nigeria, whatever movie, you can just place in your coding videos and still enjoy it as you enjoy other movies. All right. So also read blogs and articles. Then you can also follow our pages, DevSoc on Instagram. So please, you can open the last page where they see the links for our Instagram and our official website. Then you can contact us on all these social media. We are live on Instagram and our official web. You can have this link on this slide. Also, our DevSoc, which is our Discord community. You can always chat and ask your questions, just like Rahim. Rahim, I will review your assignments and give you feedback on the group. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Chisom. Thank you, Rahim. See you next class. I am impressed with
Thank
the
you, sir.
consistency of
Thank you so
Rahim.
much.
Rahim, please keep it up. Keep it up. The consistency matters a lot and is motivating my spirit. Right? If I have only you and Chiso in my class, I am successful. Right? I'm successful. So keep
Eh,
of course,
Thank
yeah.
you, sir.
All right, so keep that energy burning. Our next class, we do practical of what we have done here. So come with your system, make sure it's on Thursday. All right, we'll be doing practicals, coding practicals of what we have all discussed today. See you on Thursday. Enjoy your evening, enjoy your day, and keep learning.
Yeah, and don't forget, we are going to be uploading.
Before we go, Solomon, please, anything for us? I think they have run. Solomon.
Solomon.
Yeah. Yes, I'm requesting the people for me. Ask anything for the boys. Daniel, I hope you are done. You are come recording.
Yeah, I'm done with recording the. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
So, Solomon, your environment is very noisy. So thank you very much, Solomon, for my class system.
Can you hear me
Thank
now?
you.
Environment is noisy. How it is sound?
You said?
Can you hear
My
me now? Can you
environment
hear me
is
now?
noisy because I inside room like this. So.
Okay. You are the one. Whatever you do, you are exempted.
Yeah, Code Doctor, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, okay, everybody can hear. Okay, all right. The recordings will be uploaded today, so everybody can check the recordings and give feedback in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. I know that they pulled you out from your busy schedule. Thank you.
All right,
You
take care.
and Solomon, thank you. And
All right,
Tantan,
now.
sorry, I have not so this is not a week of friends weekend. Well, I'm saying Tantan and Solomon. Whenever I see Solomon, I see Tantan. Whenever I see Tantan,